Hello students, I am Sunil Ranjan and I am an English teacher. In this session, I am going to take up 19th century literary critics, and this topic is prescribed in many universities across the country. Now, 19th century literary critics. First, literary criticism is the comparison, analysis, interpretation, and or evaluation of works of literature. Literary criticism is essentially an opinion supported by evidence relating to theme, style, setting, or historical or political context. It usually includes discussion of the work's content and integrates ideas with other insights gained from research. Literary criticism may have a positive or a negative bias and may be a study of an individual piece of literature or an author's body of work. Now, the point that I am coming to is the first point is crisis of culture, criticism as means of social regeneration. The beginning of the 19th century had far-reaching economic, social, scientific, and literary changes which not only transformed English social life but also greatly influenced literature and literary criticism. Technological advancement ushered in the Industrial Revolution, which brought in its wake unprecedented material prosperity, but also brought in the evils of unfettered capitalism and materialism in its worst form. It led to overcrowding in big industrial cities, resulting in serious moral and social problems, the coexistence of the extremes of poverty and wealth. This led further to class tensions, the spoiling of nature that led to the loss of the sense of beauty. Despite the flow of wealth and imperialist expansion and faith in steady and unlimited progress, there was widespread feeling of discontent and social insecurity. There was a crisis of culture, and critics like Matthew Arnold felt that as against the romantic criticism of the older generation, criticism in the new age must draw closer to life and make it better and nobler. Literary criticism must serve the ends of life and promote a better understanding of cultural values and thus bring about social regeneration. Poetry must be criticism of life, and it must answer the question how to live, which is in essence a moral question. Critics like Carlyle and Ruskin sought to give a religious and moral bias to literary criticism in order to overcome the ongoing degradation and disintegration of values and ideals. 19th century criticism seeks to make life better and nobler by propagating the best that was ever thought and written. Now, the next point is search for order and balance. Now, with the memory of the horrors of the French Revolution still fresh in their minds, the 19th century critics had a passion for law and order. They wanted progress, but a steady and ordered one, healthy evolution and not a blood revolution. This passion for law and order is also reflected in the literary criticism of the age. If the romantic criticism was erratic and lawless, the older criticism allowed no freedom to the critic and was too rigid and fixed. Now the next point. Foreign influences. Auguste Comte, Saint Beuve, Taine and Saint Simon. In the 19th century, there was a search for literary compromise, for the golden mean. English literary criticism was fertilized and given new life and vitality by continental influences. The materialistic and positivist philosophy of Saint Simon and Auguste Comte, with its stress on facts and the reality of the physical world, reinforced the teaching of science and undermined the romantic and idealistic forces. This trend towards realism and matter-of-factness was further supported and strengthened by the critical methods of the French critics Taine and Sainte-Beuve. They emphasized the importance of the historical and biographical context for assessing a work of art. According to Taine, the race, the milieu, and the moment determine a writer's work, and so they must be studied thoroughly for right understanding and appreciation. This method appealed to Arnold and other critics of the age. It was a sort of compromise between romantic license, neoclassic rigidity. The dual trends. This is the next point. Though scientific rationalism and a materialistic, realistic philosophy undermined Romanticism, they continued to exist side by side during the age. There were critics like Macaulay, John Stuart Mill, Huxley, John Morley, Herbert Spencer, who expressed the rationalistic and materialistic trends of the age, while on the other side, the romantic idealistic is represented by critics like John Ruskin, Thomas Carlyle, Walter Pater, Addington Symonds, and the Pre-Raphaelites Matthew Arnold, who occupies a middle position between the two. He has the moral concern of the second group, but not their romantic negation of life and reality. He has the idealism of the first group, but has no faith in their materialistic philosophy. He would rather like to correct the evils of excessive materialism by making poetry a criticism of life through his literary criticism. Now, the next point, evolution of 19th century criticism. Now, this had three phases. The first phase, the middle phase, and the later phase. Now, the first phase, the early period, that was from 1835 to 1860, was a period of the decay and decline of literary criticism. There was practically no talented critic and no outstanding work of literary criticism. The only names worth mentioning are Keble and Brimley. No doubt, Macaulay, Carlyle, and John Stuart Mill belonged to that period, but they were no literary critics. Their literary criticism, though of a high standard, is only incidental. Their interests are historical, social, or philosophical. Now, moving to the middle phase. To the middle phase belong Arnold and Ruskin, both outstanding thinkers and scholars. Of these two, Ruskin is more an art critic than a literary critic, though his literary criticism too is illuminating and original. He considered that art to be the greatest which conveyed to the reader the greatest number of the greatest ideas. Thus, he could achieve a synthesis or compromise between art and morality. He achieved this compromise by advocating that poetry should be the criticism of life and that criticism should propagate the best that ever was thought and written. Now, coming to the later phase. In this phase, that is between 1830 and 1910, this synthesis is broken and the cult of art for art's sake, as distinguished from the early cult of art for life's sake, acquires prominence. Walter Pater and Oscar Wilde are the most powerful exponents of this cult. They are the top aesthetes who made the pursuit of beauty to the total exclusion of life and reality, the concern of their art. The ultimate source of this school of art for art's sake may be traced to the idealistic philosophy of Kant and other German philosophers. It was further revived under the influence of the French critic Gautier and the French symbolist Baudelaire. The critics of this school sought refuge from the ugliness and harshness of reality in the realm of art. A number of scholarly professors such as Leslie Stephen, Edward Dodin, George Saintsbury, and David Masson, to name a few, also devoted themselves to literary criticism. So, students, I come to the end of the explanation, and I hope you understood the topic. And if you have subscribed to my channel, well, if you haven't, do subscribe so that we meet again and again in the time to come. Thank you.